Professor Manweller, thanks for joining us today and sharing a few thoughts about the investigation against you.
Sure.
Bottom line, how would you describe the investigation?
Well, one of the things that I was so surprised about was the trivial or even nitpicky nature of the allegations. I thought there would be something, really surprising. But when I finally read the report, it was just the death of 1,000 little cuts. The first allegation that they investigated was that in Olympia at a dinner meeting, I held open the door for a woman and I helped her put her jacket on. And they claimed that that made it go from a professional dinner to a romantic dinner. And as someone who grew up, my father telling me you stand up when a woman comes to the table, you pull out her chair, you open the door for her, I was just shocked that that would now be considered professional misconduct. One of the other allegations was that there was a student of mine who sat in the front row in the center seat, and there's the allegation that I looked at her more than I looked at other students. And I suppose that's true. If you sit in the very front and you sit in the center row, I'll probably look at you more than I look at other students, but I am a professor and I do have to look at my students from time to time. The third allegation was that in walking through the cafeteria one day, I saw one of my students sitting alone at a table, no friends, and in a day where we're talking about teen suicide and teen depression, rather than just walk on by, I sat down with her and I asked her, how's your day going? Do you like being a resident advisor? I was a resident advisor when I was your age, and a little 3 or 4 minute conversation, and then I moved on. But according to the investigator, that's sexual misconduct, and that confuses me. Another allegation is that I gave my 23-year-old babysitter, who wasn't even a student, a glass of wine in the privacy of my own home. And if you've ever babysat my kids, after about 5 hours, you deserve a glass of wine. But I don't think that's professional misconduct. Another allegation is that I was at a reception and I stood too close to someone, that I was in their bubble. And I can tell you it was a crowded reception, and I probably was in her bubble, and she was in my bubble, and I think we were all in everybody's bubble, but that's kind of the nature of a reception in a crowded room. And then finally, rounding out the last 10 years, there was a student from another university that came on a tour. And the professor waved them over and said, hey, I want you to meet Professor Manweller. He works in the legislature. And one of the students says, well, I want to work in the legislature. And so we exchanged business cards. And later that night, I realized I had given her a CWU account. And so I wrote her a little email that said, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming over, but please don't use this email account because, it's a violation of the rules. Again, the CWU investigator considered that professional misconduct. So I guess to answer your question, I was just surprised about how trivial some of these things were and being blown way out of proportion.
Okay. What frustrated you most about the investigation?
Well, I think the way they sensationalized what you and I would consider just everyday events, right? Sending someone an email, sitting down at a table, standing next to someone, offering someone in your home a beverage, right? These are things that happen every day with professors in the professional world, and they have spun it to make it seem like it's far more salacious than it really is.
Dr. Manweller, taking all of that into account, what do you think was most unfair about the investigation?
Well, I think what's unfair is that Central has chosen to investigate me 3 times for the same event. This started back in 2006 when there was a rumor about an allegation, and they did a professional investigation. The HR department looked into it. They called me in and they said, look, we want to let you know that this allegation was made, but we found no substance to it. It's without merit, and we're promoting you. In fact, we're promoting you early. And I thought that was the end of it. And then 6 years later, when I decided to run for office, Central contacted me and they said, well, even though we investigated this 6 years ago, now that you're running for office, we're going to investigate it again. This time we're going to hire a professional investigator, an attorney, we're going to pay him a lot of money. So sure enough, they did the whole thing again. And at the end of the day, they decided it was still unsubstantiated. So I was like, okay, well, the second time I've been cleared. And then last year, they're like, well, you know what? We're going to investigate it for a 3rd time. Even though we've investigated this twice before and we've cleared you both times, the 3rd time's the charm. And it kind of reminds me of the Dino Rossi recount. You just keep counting the ballots till you get the answer you want. I guess you just keep investigating somebody until you get the answer you want. But that was pretty frustrating.
When you were first placed on leave at CWU. They seized your computer out of your office.
Yeah.
What, if anything, did they find?
Nothing. $120,000, and 8 months later, after looking at every one of my files, every one of my emails, they found nothing.
Professor, what keeps you awake at night when you think about this investigation?
You know, there's one thing in that report that really bothers me, like when I can't get to sleep at night and I find myself staring at the ceiling, and it's about a student of mine from about 11 years ago. And she was a single mom, and she had a very sick child. And because she had a sick child, she was driving over to Children's in Seattle all the time. And because of those health problems, she was missing a ton of class. And so eventually, about halfway through the semester, she came to me in tears and said, "Professor Manweller, I'm going to fail your class. I'm going to have to drop out. I don't know if I'm going to stay in school." And I tried to comfort her, and I told her, "Look, you know, you're not going to fail my class. If you keep working, you can pass this class. In fact, you can still get an A." And I hadn't thought of that conversations in 11 years until the investigator came forward and said, "That's an offer for sex. By you telling this student who is failing your class that you can still pass and that you can still get an A," she took that as an offer or a suggestion of sex for a grade. And I was flabbergasted, I was offended, I was embarrassed. I've told 100 students that you can still pass my class, that you can still get an A. 99 of them never took it that way, but one student has, and it might ruin my academic career.
Professor Manweller, what are you going to do different in the future?
Well, anybody that knows me knows that I have kind of a jocular sense of humor. I tease people, I rib people, I'm always making one-liners, and I just don't think you can do that anymore in this type of environment. I've always kind of had a really kind of fun relationship with my students, a little bit of back and forth, a little bit of joking, but I think now it's have to be kind of a more formal, reserved, kind of by-the-book professor. And I think it's unfortunate because I think students want to know that you're a real person and that you care about them, but it's just too risky in this environment.
Thank you, Dr. Manweller. Any final words?
Well, you know, I will tell you this. I think it's kind of unusual that Central Washington University only investigates me in election years. There usually seems to be nothing to investigate when I'm not up for election. But this time, they did hire a downtown, uber-liberal feminist attorney and paid her $120,000 to investigate all aspects of 16 years of my life. And if that's the worst that they can come up with, I'm okay. But I will tell you this. There is nothing in that report I have to apologize for. The things that are true are not inappropriate, and the things that are inappropriate are not true.